All right, so we got this image entitled Supernatural Peace. It's pretty cool. I mean, there's this tumultuous storm going on, and you can see lightning and thunder and peals of thunder, and you got this wave action going on, and you know, it's hard enough to stand up in a rowboat outside a storm, but nonetheless, here he is in one. And it makes you wonder, what's this all about? What's going on here? Well, it's, I'll tell you something that really irritates me. It irritates me that both those outside of faith in Christ and those inside of faith in Christ can somehow make him out to be more natural than supernatural. And that gets to be frustrating for me. I don't want a natural God. I don't want God like no more power or no more expectation of his power and intervention in my life than the guy down the street. I don't need that. I don't want that. And in fact, that's not who or what he is. He's a God who has supernatural power. Okay, well, what's that look like? What's supernatural power? It is the intervention of the divine in everyday life. It is God making himself known in ways and making himself experienced in ways here on this earth that those who see him just as natural would never experience. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean, look at the photograph. I mean, plug yourself in there somewhere. You've been through a storm. Sure you have. Some of you, 25% of you listening to this video have been through a storm. You've been abused, verbally or sexually. You've been through a trial, no question. Huge storm. You've been through a crisis, emotional crisis. You've lost a loved one. You've had this incredible anxiety about a career, or some of you have had an unwanted pregnancy, or you've been through seasons of depression, or you've contemplated suicide. This is all part of the human dilemma. You're freaking out about a final exam, or you're trying to stay off of academic probation. I mean, who knows? There's people going through all kinds of stuff, pending bankruptcy, lawsuits, divorce, you name it. I mean, it's never ending. And you know, people want heaven on earth. Friend, it ain't happening. There ain't no heaven on earth. There's never going to be, so don't expect it. In fact, quite the opposite. Heaven is off into the future. It ain't here on earth. So Jesus and Belka has given us this image to communicate something to you and I. All right, first of all, there's going to be some stinking hard trials in life. It's just kind of inevitable. It is the fact that there's going to be that in this life because we live in a fallen world. There's nothing, that's no reflection on God. I mean, he's the one that set up the perfect world. Mankind's the one that messed that up. So it's not to blame God for that. Now the question is, how do we sustain ourselves? How do we maintain our poise and composure in the midst of the storm? Now that's the question worth answering. Quick story, Desert Storm. A chaplain is with a unit of soldiers moving across the desert, and over the radio they get this message that there's a sandstorm coming, a bad one. And rather than advance, they're told to just stand still and let the sandstorm come and just weather it. It won't last long, and then move forward after that. So they get to the top of this hill and they just plant themselves. They cover up their guns, they cover up their faces, and they just wait, stand there. Sandstorm comes, and they're covered in sand when it's over, and they're standing there, and they look in front of them, and there in front of them are now exposed landmines that they would have walked into immediately and blown up had there not been a storm. The point is, God intervenes in ways at times to bring about storms and trials and allow them to happen in our life because on some level they're necessary to help us grow and mature and depend upon him as God. It's a great example of how not to be anxious. This is what God's interested in. Do not be anxious in anything, but in everything, with prayer and petition, present your requests to God, and the peace of God that transcends all understanding, there you go, supernatural, will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. The fact of the matter is the wind and the waves obey Christ. And you and I get into the tornadoes of life, and we've got to know that he's right there with us. Because he wants to be. Because he's been through the storm himself, and he's going to help us get through it. What most people want to do is hide from it, avoid it, deny it, anesthetize themselves, or get involved in things that distract them from it. Nobody wants to go through a storm. Christ wants you to go through a storm with him. and he'll silence all that neurosis and anxiety and fear and trepidation and everything else that goes with it. Anyway, supernatural peace. You got to have a relationship with him for him to show up, though. He's not interested in just hanging out and you denying who he is. He's interested in you accepting who he is and who he said he is and being there with you in the storm. Supernatural peace.